Some of you might relate to having one parent who is on the cluster B spectrum, a narcissist, psychopath, sociopath, or borderline, and the other parent is a codependent. This is an empathic person with a good heart who's unfortunately co-signing on the abuse and enabling the abuser. Now, it's hard enough to pierce the denial about accepting that one of your parents is some form of manipulator or abuser. It's even harder to realize that the other parent, the codependent, the enabler, is actually part of the problem. They have a good heart, but unfortunately, they make bad decisions that affect you. You might even relate to having been that codependent parent. In this video, I want to talk about how the codependent parent co-signs on the abuse and what you can do about it now. Martin Luther King's quote, "Silence is betrayal," exactly sums up the damage that a codependent parent can do to you when they're co-signing on the abuse of your other parent. They didn't speak up about the abuse. They didn't stand up to the abuser. They didn't leave. They didn't protect you and your siblings. They might have even minimized your feelings about the abuse or even mocked you for the feelings that you had about the abuse. They might have blamed you instead or otherwise allowed the abuse to happen. Now, why would a parent turn their blind eye to the abuse of their children? Because they're taking the easy way out. At some level, whether consciously or unconsciously, they realized that it was just a lot easier to appease the abusive person and not have to deal with them. And unfortunately, that situation had very negative impacts in your life. So the result of having a codependent parent who didn't do the work of recovery from codependency is that they're going to hurt you too. This will be very hard to accept. Now, it might be that you had a codependent parent who got out and woke up and realized that they were part of the problem and that they put you at risk and that they didn't protect you. And they might be avidly doing the recovery work from codependency now. That's a different situation. But you might relate to having that enabler codependent parent who's still in the relationship or still in contact with the other abusive parent. Managing that relationship with the enabler codependent parent is going to be challenging. You're going to need to have boundaries, and the boundaries that you have with that person might end up looking a lot like the boundaries that you have with the abuser. If you're finding that the enabler is trying to force you into contact or making you feel bad about not having contact with the abuser, they might even give you an ultimatum that they won't see you if you aren't willing to also have contact with the abuser. Of course, that parent is also in the trauma bond, so they're going to defend the abuser. You might try to manage the relationship with the codependent enabler parent and eventually get to a point where there's a breaking point. It's a turning point, and you realize the insanity of trying to continue to manage that relationship because it's not working. Maybe your dad is the codependent and he's a wonderful person with a good heart, but he's defending your mother, who's an abusive person who you don't want to have contact with because you're not okay when you have contact with her. And maybe he gives you that ultimatum and says he won't see you without her. And maybe when you really look at it, you realize how emotionally unavailable your dad really is, how he's completely disconnected from your feelings and emotions, probably from his own as well, and how you can't have a deep emotional connection with him, how your relationship is really a very superficial type of relationship. And you might realize that he even thinks you're crazy for thinking that your mother's abusive. And maybe then you realize how that pattern applies to your life, how you're continuing to chase after other men who are emotionally unavailable and who think you're crazy. Or maybe it's just the opposite for the male child of a mother or a father who's codependent. The harsh reality that's hard to accept is that what you tolerate in your own family from your own parents is what you're going to tolerate from other people. It's what you're going to unconsciously seek out. So if you get to that point where you realize that's the pattern, you keep chasing after that same person who's just like your codependent parent. Maybe now you very easily recognize abusive people and you stay away from those people. Maybe you get to that point where you want to have a real deep relationship with someone. You don't want to keep looking for these unavailable people and people who think you're crazy for the perceptions of reality and the feelings that you have. So you're going to find that the enabler will co-sign on the abuse mostly through their silence, but it could get to the point where you start speaking more and more your truth and you come up against what they actually really feel, and they might defend the abuser and they might blame you. So I have 5 tips for you for dealing with an enabler parent. Number 1, set your boundaries. You got to protect yourself first. Recognize that that parent has a good heart, but they're making poor decisions, and those decisions are affecting you. So maybe you need to get more distance from them, because every contact that you have with them is like an indirect contact with the abusive person. Number 2, speak your truth. When you speak your truth, you see where you stand with people. Any relationship that can't survive the truth is not real. Number 3, put yourself first for once. Everything is about the abusive person, their needs, their feelings, their perceptions of reality. You don't have to follow that pattern. Number 4, work on releasing the guilt of making decisions that protect you and keep you safe and are okay for you and your life. That's not going to go away overnight. It's going to take months, probably years, to work through the layers and layers of that false guilt. And number 5, most importantly, end the cycle, end the legacy of abuse in your family by opting out, by taking responsibility for yourself, by working on your recovery, by not co-signing on the abuse of another abuser in your life. This is going to mean you're going to have to make some tough decisions. They're not going to be easy. You don't want to hit the easy button like your codependent enabler parent did just to get by, just to appease the abuser, and just to make things easier on them. They say when you make easy decisions, you lead a tough life. When you make tough decisions, you lead a much easier life. I want to remind you to check out my self-care mastery course if you grew up in a family like this, if you want to undo the programming of the self-sacrificing, the self-abandoning, and the people-pleasing, which causes you to co-sign on the abuse of either yourself or other people in your life. And if you're looking for a licensed therapist, I've partnered with BetterHelp, which is an online portal of therapists around the world who can help you get over the abuse and the trauma that you've been through. I'm going to link that below in the video description, and I'm also going to put it in the first pinned comment below. With that link, you'll get 10% off your first month. So I hope this video was helpful for you to understand the role of the enabler or codependent parent so that you can heal from what you went through as a child and so that you don't repeat those same patterns yourself. If you did, there's still time to change that. There's still time to make it right with your kids. You just have to be willing to do the work. So if this video was helpful for you, give it a like or let me know in the comments below if there's something you want to add about an experience that you had as the child of an enabler, codependent parent, maybe even some regrets that you have as a parent that you want to help other people know so they don't make those same mistakes. I would love it if you leave those in the comments below. I'm sending you a big hug.